you are descending when you're going from this Jerusalem to that town. So the high priest went down to Caesarea with some of the elders, that is, some of the important officials of the Jewish community, and a lawyer named Tertullus. And they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. And here we go. Tertullus says, "We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix. We acknowledge this with profound gratitude." Yeah, he's laying it on thick. Not we don't. The historians don't say much about Tertullus himself, but what they do say is pretty much in agreement. He was a hired gun. Gee, they had hired gun, high-profile lawyers, just like today. Oh yeah, some things never change, right? The only thing that was lacking was back in the day they didn't have television, they didn't have social media, and they probably, you didn't get plastered with a TV ad every 10 seconds. But uh, yes, just you can't. Yes, probably with the prefix with 222. Yeah, one of those. Yeah, I'm on it. I'll defend you. Yes. Anyway, that's Mr. Tertullus, and yes, he is laying it on thick. He knows that he's not ashamed of appealing to the baser nature of using flattery to get this guy's to get in this guy's favor and get on his side. Is it hypocritical? Yeah. When he tells Tertullus how the Jews just really love him and how they appreciate everything that he's done to maintain peace in the valley. Among the things that Felix has done to maintain peace is to massacre Jews. So, but Tertullus is kind of, we'll look the other way. That's for another day. Today, you are our good buddy, Felix, and we're so thankful for everything you've done for us. And we don't want to take up your time because we know you're a very busy man, got many things to do. But verse 4, in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. We have found this man, and here he's obviously pointing to Paul, this man to be a troublemaker. In fact, your translation may read Tertullus calling him a plague. He is stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. What you talking about, Tertullus? Well, that's a fancy way of calling Christianity, giving it a nasty name. First of all, remember the joke that one of Jesus' disciples made about, Jesus coming from Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? Apparently, that was a persistent joke in the culture of the day. This group, this bunch of ragamuffins that Paul represents, it's a sect. I mean, it's such an extreme form of our community that it's on the fringe, if not completely outside our normal and accepted community. And it comes from Nazareth. It's a Nazarene sect. These Christians. He's a ringleader of them. And he even tried to desecrate the temple. He profaned our temple, or tried to anyway. So we seized him. And then some translations don't have what I'm about to read because it comes from what the translators determined to be less reliable sources, but several included anyway, and it fills in some blanks. But it has Tertullus continuing, we seized this man and we would have judged him in accordance with our law. But the commander, Lysias, came and took him from us with much violence. That darned old Lysias, if it hadn't been for him, we could have taken care of this, and this would have been, you wouldn't be troubled with this today. these persnickety Roman commanders. But in fact, it's Lysias's fault. He saved us. Uh, he prevented us from meting out justice, which in this case would have amounted to killing Paul, something that legally the Jews were not allowed to do. But in certain circumstances, the Romans could be persuaded to look the other way. Yeah, and so we could have killed him, but Lysias prevented us from doing that, and furthermore, he set up this ridiculous situation of our having to come all the way to Caesarea to discuss this case with you. By examining Mr. Paul yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we are bringing against him. Yes, I'm going to step out of the way. You talk to this man and you'll find out just what a troublemaker he is. And I rest my case. Need I say more? And he's barely finishing his address, his opening remarks, when verse 9, the other Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. Kind of like if you ever tune in the BBC channel and watch the parliamentary proceedings where, a party leader says something and his brethren sit back and say, hear, 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 hear. Maybe something like that. Maybe it's a little bit noisier in this case. Maybe kind of a heck yeah. You tell him, Tertullus. Yeah. Get rid of this. Get rid of this, Paul. We are done with him. He is so last week. So when it quiets down, verse 10, Felix the governor motioned for Paul to speak, and Paul replied. And notice the nature of Paul's remark. Tertullus, when he talks, lays it on so thick, you know where he's coming from. Paul doesn't go in for the flattery. He's short, sweet, and everything he says is true. He says, I know for a number of years you've been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. I can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I indeed went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making. Paul's basically challenging Tertullus by saying, where's the beef? You've laid down some pretty fancy charges here. Now show us the evidence. Show us the proof. Show me that I've actually done. Any of the things that you claim I've done. Verse 14, Paul continues. However, I do admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way. Remember, that is how, at least in the early days, Christians referred to their way of life, of following Jesus. I do worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection to both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. Here Paul is laying it out and stating very simply but clearly that, hey, I don't know where these guys are coming from or why they're saying what they're saying, because contrary to what they're maintaining, I haven't abandoned the God of my fathers or the law or the prophets. I haven't, I'm faithful to God. I'm faithful to the scriptures. I'm faithful to everything God has laid down, up to and including what the scriptures teach about there being a resurrection of the dead. The facts and the evidence and the law are all on my side, Governor. And so are the facts and the evidence at hand. Paul continues, verse 17. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia. These are, as a reminder, those are the folks who created the rabble, who stirred up the crowds and caused the riot with false charges. Some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin, unless it was this one thing I shouted as I stood in their presence. It is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. What Paul is stating clearly and simply is, hey, I'm not guilty of any civil or criminal statute here, any crime, not even a misdemeanor. If there's any kind of disagreement, it's within Jewish law and Jewish religion. This is totally out of the province of Roman law. I agree, Governor, we shouldn't be bothering you with this, but it's because of my enemy's persistence. My enemies wish to take my life for no good reason at all. That's why I am here. Yes. Yes. It's yes, I am innocent, but the more important thing, the thing about Paul, and this good reminder, he's not afraid to take any situation to preach the gospel. even if his life is at stake. It's like, hey, I got a crowd here. Yeah, they're trying to kill me, but maybe if I can talk to them a few minutes, let me reason with them. No, that's right. There's something more important, even if it's even if it is an existential issue, like will I live or die as a result of what happens today? Well, yeah, yeah, that is kind of important, but more important is getting that message out there, helping folks to realize that there is something beyond the here and now. And you're absolutely right. He brings up the issue of the resurrection twice in this very short and sweet and simple and plain address, and all at the same time maintaining, hey, look, um, this is something that still, these guys may disagree with what I'm saying, what I believe, and why I believe it, but it is still faithful to the God that we serve and the God that we worship and the scriptures. And Luke continues in verse 22. Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, your translation may try to capture Luke's way of phrasing things. And I love the way Luke loves to phrase things, kind of like, well, not a little was made, and so forth. And some translations in that vein would say Felix, who had a rather accurate knowledge of the way. Yeah, he should in his life and times, even if he wasn't a follower of it. At that point, Felix adjourned the proceedings. Paul has proved his point. in any given day, any other kind of situation, governor would have said, this ain't this has nothing to do with me. This is not part of my job. You guys hassle it out for yourselves, among yourselves. Just don't kill each other doing it. Then I have to get involved. But go your way and, everybody will be happy. Felix should have done that. He doesn't. He just adjourns the proceedings on this basis. Well, we need more evidence. We need a fuller explanation of what's going on here. And the reason for that will become a little bit more clear as we go into the chapter. But his explanation for simply adjourning the proceedings and not rendering a verdict is this. When Lysias the commander comes, Felix said, I will decide your case. Well, Lysias wrote me this wonderful letter, and we really want to know. There may be reasons for his letter writing and for him sending Paul down here that haven't been made clear yet. So let's wait for Lysias to make an appearance. I'll send for him, and we can get this thing hashed out a little bit more completely. So Paul's going to continue as a guest of the Roman government for the time being, but Felix makes one concession in Paul's favor. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard. Basically, Paul will now be under house arrest. But he ordered the centurion to give Paul some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. In other words, Paul is still technically under arrest, but with one difference. If he can find some decent quarters to stay in while this trial is going on, he can do that. He doesn't have to basically spend his time in a prison, which nobody wants to do, and are terrible accommodations for any and everyone. Not only that, Paul, while he's living in this rented house, very likely with chains, but it's still in his own domicile, kind of, sort of. He can let his friends come and go, and then friends can help take care of his needs. So Felix makes that accommodation. Several days later, Paul continues, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish. Not only was she Jewish, she was Felix's latest trophy wife. Probably at least his third wife. This, among other things, Felix was not very faithful in terms of marriage. He basically married someone who appealed to him physically. And apparently when that physical attraction or when the initial thrill faded away, Felix was on the lookout for another wife. And by now he's on wife number 3, Drusilla. And apparently she's not that old. She is barely of age. She may be like 18 years old. And so, but he appears with Drusilla. Why Drusilla is there, Luke doesn't elaborate, but Felix sends for Paul, and he listened to him as he spoke about faith in Jesus Christ. As Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, "That's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At a more convenient time, please go away, Paul. You're making me nervous here." Why do you suppose Paul was making Felix nervous? Because what Paul was addressing and talking about in his discussions with Felix touched on probably everything that Felix was doing in his life, everything that was contrary to what God would have him do in terms of righteousness. And probably Felix didn't have to be very religiously oriented to have this sense that his way of life, the way he led his life, was contrary to what a righteous God would want him to do. Self-control Hey, forget about self-control and Phoenix. The two have never even made a handshaking acquaintance. And the judgment to come. When you have lived, when you've gone your own way and you have lived what even you have determined to be an ungodly life, an unrighteous life, let's just throw it out there, a sinful life, probably you don't like to spend much time thinking about the judgment to come. How are things going to roll up when the roll is called and you have to give an account to God for the life that you were given? How did you spend that life, Felix? Well, I don't want to talk about it. That's what it rolls up to. Go away, Paul. Go away. So Paul clearly touches a nerve. You know, that's enough for now. Suddenly I remembered I have a busy calendar. A lot of things to do before I go home tonight. So you go away and come back when it's more convenient. We'll pick up where we left off, Paul. I'll send for you. Well, apparently Felix was sending for Paul several times, and not necessarily to talk about his soul or the state of his soul or his spiritual life or his standing with God, because Luke writes, verse 26, at the same time, Felix was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe. Yeah, I mean, this is so much in keeping with the way Felix governed and the way Felix counted up his political alliances and so forth. What have you done for me lately? What can you do for me? Hey, you look pretty wealthy, or you look like you have some wealthy friends. I'm having a little party next month, and I'm kind of the party fund is running a little short. Could use some help here, and so on and so on. Felix loved bribes, and he figured, hey, at the end of the day, Paul's just like anyone else, especially someone who should not be where he is right now and would not be, perhaps, if he had more of a political standing. But he may not be worth much personally, but maybe he has some powerful friends. Maybe at some point, maybe Paul will come to me and say, Felix, we both have got to get on with our lives. How about, what would it take to put this all away and give me my freedom? Yada, yada, yada. Felix kept waiting for that offer, for that monetary donation that never arrived. Just as Lysias the commander apparently never arrived to follow up on his letter. There is no account in Acts or any other historical source about Lysias, the Roman commander, ever coming to Caesarea to follow up on his letter and to give additional testimony as to the situation. So what it all boiled down to, Paul got to spend 2 additional years, as a guest of the Roman government, at the whim of Felix, who hoped that maybe Paul would somehow, in some way, either directly from him or indirectly through his friends, grease Felix's palms with silver, as they say. Never happened. So, verse 27, when 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. But because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, which is kind of curious, as to he was never really a friend or a supporter of the Jews, but maybe he needed something to look good on his resume when he returned to Rome. Yeah, I'll do this and it'll keep the Jewish rabble quiet. So I'll leave Paul in prison. That's something they want. It won't make them totally happy. They want him dead. But hey, if we keep him bottled up here in Caesarea in prison, that's throwing something to them. They can't complain that I haven't been listening to them. So that's what he does as we end chapter 24. And Paul's legal case will continue. And as we look into chapter 25, which will be the basis of our study for next week. If you've got some time this week, I hope you'll go through chapter 25, take a look at it, and Lord willing, we'll meet back here next Sunday and take a look at this. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Hope you got something out of it. And let's continue to pray for rain. And hopefully we will keep cool this June. We won't try to be too hot. It doesn't work out, but hey, it's always a worthy goal. Anyway, thanks so much for your time. We'll see you next Sunday. Yes, I'm very much a believer in wishful thinking.